For 90 days, I drew Chris Hemsworth every day to see how good I could get. This video covers days 30 through 60 of that journey. Over the first 30 days, I learned how to draw Chris's features and get them right using the grid approach. If you want to watch more about that, there's a link in the description. But during those 30 days, I made big strides. Chris Hemsworth went from looking like a monkey to looking more like a person, though a not very proportional person. He kind of looked like he had a double chin, and there was definitely more work to be done. So starting on day 30, I realized that what I needed to work on was shading. The grid approach makes it so you know you have the features in the correct spot, but the shading makes a huge difference as to what you're actually seeing and how much life there is in a drawing itself. I looked on YouTube for how to shade, and there were a lot of different drawing tutorials on how to shade balls and fruits, apples, and I decided instead of doing that, I wanted to shade the features that I actually was going to be shading. So I looked up specific tutorials for different facial features and I broke it up. I decided that I was going to spend some time learning how to draw noses, then eyes, lips, and ears, and then I would try again. For a week, I just drew noses. I looked up some art tutorials, and if any of you want to learn how to draw facial features, you should look up Art of Way and Rapid Fire Art tutorials, because their videos taught me how to draw all these facial features. So I watched the video on how to draw noses, and an important part of drawing is never really drawing lines. Every facial feature should move to the next feature in a fluid shading motion. For example, if you look at your nose, right? Your nose starts here, but you don't see a line when you look at someone's face. You just see the light changing, and that tells you that their nose is protruding. And this is the same for drawing. When you look at a nose, if the light were moving straight from the front, then you'd have a light, I guess, like cone going down the bridge of your nose, and there'd be a little circle at the bottom, and light would move away. If the light is coming from one side stronger than the other, then you might have a shadow on one side of the nose, where on the other it's brighter. Going down to the nostrils, the shading gets darker as you move toward your face, and it goes down until your nostrils meet your face. The end of your nose casts a shadow on your lip if the light's coming from above. So depending on where the light is coming from, there's a lot of different shading techniques you can use to really bring that to life. I spent a week delving into these shading techniques and just drawing noses. The first day, I just drew tons of noses, just very quickly, drew sketches of noses and shaded them. I drew wide noses, long noses, big noses, just trying to get the shading right for each. And the big difference for each of them was just where the shading was placed, and that would give you the effect of whether it was a big nose, a long nose, whatever it may be. Huge flaring nostrils. Then I decided to spend an entire day drawing just the nose. So I took an entire piece of paper and I drew a big outline, and for an hour, I just shaded a nose. And it's incredible how much detail you can put into a nose. I'm still not very good at drawing noses, but I was able to create a nose that I thought looked pretty realistic. And once I had done that, I moved on to eyes. And I repeated the same process with eyes. I learned that the way you shade eyes should reflect kind of the facial features around the eye. So right here, your cheekbone moves up to your eye, and then your eyeball starts, and the shading should be different there. Where your nose begins, this transition from nose to eye should also be shaded differently. There's a fold in a lot of people's eyes, and that is shaded differently as well. All of these different features to bring out a three-dimensional shape and life through the eyes comes through shading. Once I had done lots of sketches of eyes and I felt like I had the general shading and proportions right, I found a reference photo and I just zoomed in on the eye, and I spent an hour trying to make the eye as realistic as possible without using the grid approach, just using kind of what I saw. And I think it turned out pretty well. At that point, I moved on to lips, and I repeated the same process with lips. Lips are incredibly intricate. Because it's round, the light is going to hit your lips in different ways at different points on your lip. So you have to shade that differently. And shading is what gives the lips their three-dimensional form. If not, it's just three lines, right? The upper lip, middle, and bottom. But when you add all that shading, it actually looks like a mouth, a real person's mouth. The last facial feature I wanted to get right were ears. I had really struggled with the ears on Chris Hemsworth, and it's because they're so intricate. And I learned some quick tricks to get the general shape of an ear correctly. So you have the general shape, and then within it, there's a Y that you shade, and that gives it its shape. I didn't spend too much time drawing ears, but I spent enough time to have the general shape right. They felt more peripheral than anything else, so I didn't focus too much on them. After I'd drawn all these facial features, I was really excited to get back to drawing Chris. I had a bit over a week to do my final drawing, and that's a little longer than it takes to do a drawing, or than it usually takes to do a drawing for me. I decided to spend a day drawing a quick sketch of Chris. Just like I had the very first day, I restricted my time to 30 minutes, and I didn't use a grid approach. I just wanted to see if I could employ these new techniques I had learned to make him look more realistic, and what kind of difference there had actually been in my drawing without using the grid. I was amazed to see how realistic he looked. He looked like a person, and I was very hopeful after this because I hadn't spent much time on this drawing, and I knew there was so much more detail I could add. So with 7 days left, I started my real last drawing of Chris Hemsworth for these 60 days. I drew the grid and I started drawing the features, and most of my time was spent shading. After these 30 days of really paying attention to shading and how light plays with different features on your face, when I looked at the reference photo, I saw so much more detail. I could tell where the light was hitting him, where the cast shadows were. Everything just made more sense. So when I was putting that to paper, it became a lot easier. And this last drawing that I finished on day 60 was so much better than the first one, and so much better than day 30 even. Features were still in the right places because just like day 30, I was using the grid approach, but now there was real life to him and everything looked correct. He looked three-dimensional. It really looked like Chris Hemsworth. But it did take 7 hours to actually draw this. And because I had gotten far better than I'd ever hoped to become, I decided to change things up for the last 30 days. Instead of spending 7 hours making a sketch as realistic as I could, I decided I wanted to spend 30 to 40 minutes a day just drawing quick sketches and see how good I could get at doing that. So stay tuned for that video.